Hello and welcome back to another episode of Your Drone Questions Answered. I'm John Dickow here to find the answers to your drone questions that you submit. Today's drone question is a very, very common one. The original question was, how do you avoid crashing your drone? But I'm already going to sort of re-swizzle that into how do you avoid or minimize the chances of crashing your drone? And there are even some more nuances to that. But with me today is Dusty Jolley. He's community manager at Drone Launch Academy. He's going to help answer this question. Thanks for joining me, Dusty.
Sure. John, thanks for having me here.
No problem. I'm just going to throw the question at you and we can kind of just go from there. In your opinion, how can you minimize the chances of crashing your drone?
I think that if you're flying drones enough, it's just really a matter of time just throughout your journey of getting better and improving that you're going to end up crashing a drone at some point in time. And so maybe it's on the front end when you're starting off with a cheaper drone or something that doesn't have GPS capabilities or something that doesn't actually have some sort of a location or altitude hold. And so those are definitely going to be a little bit easier to crash, especially when learning. But I feel like with any drone, there's a few things that you could probably do even before leaving the house. Just from my experience, I've been flying drones for several years, and I can tell you that I've crashed my fair share pretty much every drone that I've owned at some point in time. And so the main thing is when something like that does happen is to be able to take away, what did I do wrong or what could I have done differently to avoid this outcome in the future. And so one of the things to make sure it's very easy, a lot of times when we're trying to get things ready to go and kind of get out of the house is to maybe, there's been times when I've been charging batteries and maybe thought that I had the other ones plugged in right or something and was charging two or three at a time and get to the field and realize I've only got one fully charged battery and the other two are not. The same goes with your remote. So that's one of those things before you leave the house, making sure just double check, even as your pre-flight checklist before you load everything into the car to make sure that you're double checking battery levels on everything, even, your tablet or your phone device, whatever you're going to use to connect.
That's a good point because that's probably a pretty common cause of a drone crash is you're dead in the air because of dead battery.
Been there.
Yeah. You mentioned just beginner drones. Do you have any just off the top of your head suggestions of a good beginner drone that may not burn a huge hole in your wallet?
Honestly, for me, not so much super cheap drones. Like I've had the cheap, $100, $200 drones. And, from my experience, none of those really do a great job. Even if they do advertise that they have some sort of an altitude or some sort of a location hold, they really don't compete with some of the GPS drones like DJI and Altel, some of the other more expensive drones. Now, I do think that you can get into some of the DJI drones, such as like the DJI minis, and you could also look for some refurbished or used units if you're just trying to get your foot into the hobby to see if it is something that you wanted to try out, to see if it is something that's for you without breaking the bank, but you're probably still going to spend anywhere from $300 to $500 on something that would have decent enough GPS capabilities to where it's not going to just fly away from you or just drift off in the wind.
That makes sense. Let's just say, okay, I crashed my drone. Are there, and I guess it always just depends on the scope of the damage that's done to the drone. When you think about these kind of drones, are there replaceable parts? Is that a common solution sometimes? Or is it only so many replaceable parts you can get a lot of times if you've really totaled your
Sure.
drone?
Whenever you purchase, if you purchase one of these drones from Amazon or something, it's not really going to come with any sort of a warranty or anything. So if it does end up crashing into a tree or hit the ground, it's pretty much one and done at that point. Now, when you do buy a new DJI drone or like a lot of these other companies, you can either purchase kind of a warranty or what they would call their refresh program. So if you do end up, I believe if something happens, the drone gets stolen or you crash it into the lake or you do end up just totaling out the drone, there is some coverage there. In DJI, from my experience, I've crashed an Air 2S, a Mavic 2 Zoom, a Phantom 4 Pro. And to be honest with you, they have a very reasonable repair program. So what you typically do is you kind of write in, submit a ticket with DJI, get on with support. They send you a UPS label. You send off your drone, no cost to you. They assess it. They'll write you back, tell you what the estimated cost of the repair is going to be. And then you can make the final decision whether or not you want to move forward with the repair or just have them send you back, your broken drone. But for the most part, it's pretty reasonable. I think when I had a broken arm on my Air 2S, it was about $75, which is pretty reasonable for something for the repair. And the majority of the time, any times I've had issues, whether it be a remote or whether it be actually with a drone, they actually send you back it looks like a brand new refurbished unit. It's something that it's not always the drone that you submitted in the first place for repair. They just send you back a new unit to begin with. And so, yes, it is expensive, but I feel like if you're going to be flying these things enough, you're going to end up crashing them. And so it's just part of it. You can pay for the refresh or you can pay for insurance on these, but typically you're going to, at some point in time, have to come up with either there's enough damage done to the drone that it is totaled and it's not worth paying for the repair. But from my experience, a lot of times the repair as long as it's not too significant, it is somewhat reasonable for the most part.
That's nice to know, at least that some of these companies offer some kind of repair program that makes sense beyond just buying a new drone, or just knowing that so many
Yeah,
beginner drone pilots have that anxiety, and when you're making that kind of purchase, it would be so nice to know that there's maybe something. They've got that in mind, at least, that
sure.
something that can crash.
No, and the best part is when you crash in front of the client. And so that was what happened with my Phantom 4 Pros. I managed to put it into a tree when we were filming a new roof going onto a house. We managed to get it out of the tree, but it was actually when we knocked it out of the tree, it was the fall then that damaged the drone. And so that repair alone was probably more on the higher end, but I think it was around $370. But they did, 2 weeks later, I had a brand new drone. And so it's just back at it. It doesn't matter how experienced you are, it still hurts every time.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned that too. I mean, it's something that is gonna happen or likely to happen as a drone pilot. I'm sure over time you learn things, you get better at
Mhm.
flying the drone in general. Do you have any tips for like a beginner drone pilot who might be listening or watching? If you're going out there the first few times, just some real basic tips to avoid.
Sure, absolutely. Anytime before if I know that I'm going somewhere, whether it be a job site or if I've just got somewhere in my head that I want to go fly, typically what I'll do is get on Google Earth and just kind of go ahead and just figure out and get some sort of an idea of what the lay of the land's going to look like. And figure out if there's going to be trees or buildings or power lines, something that I need to go ahead and kind of be aware of. But the good thing about Google Earth is that you can kind of get that bird's eye view without necessarily having to put a drone into the air. So you might be able to pick up on some things that you wouldn't necessarily see if you're just driving around in your truck. Then at that point, when I get on site somewhere, I'll go ahead and take a second look at all my surroundings, make sure that everything's powered on, make sure that I've got, again, full battery on the drone, the remote, and on my tablet. And then it's always important, especially with the DJI drones, make sure that before you take off or do anything, that you go ahead and get your home point recorded, and that you do go ahead and acquire all the satellites for that to go ahead and take place. And so a lot of times people get there, kind of take off, and it's important though that the home point is recorded, to wherever you want that home point to be set, whether it's by you as the pilot, or if it is kind of where you want the drone to come and acknowledge as the home point to come and land. But it's always good to make sure that you've got the connection with the satellites at that point to make sure that you're not going to lose connectivity. Then at that point, when I've kind of got connection and I know that the drone is holding its place, I'll go ahead and we'll take a look and figure out and identify around me what's going to be the highest altitude object that I need to be worried about. So whether that be a building or a tree. So then I'll usually take the drone up to about what I feel like is the altitude of the same altitude as that object. And that'll kind of give me my floor as far as, how low or how high I need to be to avoid hitting anything at that altitude. So that'll kind of give you your floor as far as, that you can always fly above that and not necessarily have to worry about hitting a tree or anything because you've already done the due diligence, kind of go ahead and just assessing your surroundings as far as like what's the highest altitude obstacle that you've got to worry about. Then other than that, especially a lot of times like I'll fly FPV. And so with FPV, even when you're flying traditional line of sight drones, it's important to always helps to have a visual observer. So there's a lot of times where you're looking at the screen and you're trying to get the shot. Either you get distractions or maybe there's a tree behind you that you're not seeing. And a lot of times different drones have different obstacle avoidance systems on them. And so like I know like the Air 2S lacks the obstacle avoidance on the sides, whereas some of the other drones do have those. And so, keep that in mind if you are flying an Air 2S backwards, you're flying it sideways, that it's not going to pick up on this pine tree, maybe that's over here. I can tell you that from experience. So that's where a visual observer does come into play, to where they can kind of help you get close in those shots, but also make sure that you're not going to get so close that you're going to run into something. When flying FPV, you're flying into a fixed camera. So your field of view is 100% fixed at all times. And so your peripheral vision, you don't have any peripheral vision outside of what you can see there. So being aware of your surroundings when you're flying, if you're flying into new surroundings or flying into a building, always kind of keep in mind when you're passing stuff, try to remember, how far away is this from me? So when you're orbiting something, you're not going to blindly fly or blind back into somebody or to something else at that point. So always just kind of being aware of your surroundings and not necessarily getting so focused on the shot that you're losing sight of the big picture and what's necessarily around you.
Cool. No, that's
Um,
fantastic, and I'm glad you brought up FPV too, because we've actually talked about FPV and just how that opens up a whole new, swath of
that's a
opportunities.
whole nother episode. Yeah.
Yeah,
FPV, you will crash.
yep, and I highly recommend anybody who's interested in FPV, go back and listen to that episode. It was a really good conversation. I learned a ton, but yeah, crashing is that you're up in the risk there. You mentioned something else, going back to home feature or the return to home, function on your drone, and That one really
Mhm.
spoke to me because that was one of my first crash experiences, and it kind of the lesson was just understand the features of your drone and take the time to learn and
Mhm.
take things in kind of baby steps because I got my drone, took it out of the box, charged it up, sent it up into the air, and really just thought that little home, return to home button was just gonna bring it back, and I did not know that I had to actually calibrate it, get the settings right, and so
Sure.
my batteries are running out. I needed to get the drone landed. I pressed return to home and it just dropped into a tree. Luckily, it wasn't like it didn't explode or shatter into a million pieces. There were propellers everywhere. So that
Sure.
spoke to me.
Well, no, and on that note too, it's always good to make sure that you get your home point recorded, but you also within the app, like John was saying, as far as knowing the drone and the capabilities of the software, the app, and everything, you can go in, you can actually change. Okay, so whenever the drone is experiencing low battery, so you can tell the drone whenever we do want to be notified of a low battery. So typically I keep it, fairly conservative. So 25% somewhere in there, to give myself plenty of time. That's another thing to be mindful of, especially if you're kind of flying out and you're getting pretty long distance away from where you're at. Always be mindful of making sure that you've got enough battery to bring your drone back. But also one of the settings that you can set within the remote itself is, so if there is a low battery warning, what is the drone going to do? Do we want it to sit still into the air? Do we want it to come back to the home point, or do we want it to actually come back to the remote to where the pilot's at? And so those are different things that you can go in and change and set depending on whatever your situation is. But it's also, it's one of those things that you want to have all this kind of worked out in your head before ever taking off, and to kind of go ahead and play out that worst case scenario. Like if this does happen, if I do start to run out of battery or if I do lose connection, what do I want that drone to do? Where do I want it to fly? And then how high does the drone actually need to be flying on the way back to avoid any of those obstacles that we were taking a look at before?
That's a really good point. I wanted to ask you this just because I feel like this is kind of a big component of just the question in itself is to sort of speak to the anxiety and the fear of crashing a drone. What would you say to somebody who really wants to get into flying a drone, wants to make the investment, purchase a drone, but that's what's holding them back is just kind of this lack of confidence, this anxiety of, I'm going to destroy this thing and I'm going to be, a few hundred
Sure.
dollars, maybe more short after that.
I would say don't let the fear at all hold you back from this. I think it's one of those you can always take this in baby steps. The good thing is I know like with a lot of the DJI drones, I don't remember the exact mode, but it's kind of a beginner starter mode to where it limits how far the drone can get from you. And for the most part, a lot of these drones do have really good obstacle avoidance systems. I just have learned to never really trust them. I think that's going to make you a little bit better of a pilot to not always be trusting these sensors to be picking up on stuff because there's a lot of times that things do get by the sensors. And with that being said, I feel like don't let it be the end of the world if you do crash. Also, always be mindful, like if you do crash, to kind of before you start to panic or something, to kind of take a deep breath and to go ahead and kind of think things through in your head. I think a lot of times it's easy to panic, whether you lose video or something, all of a sudden just kind of freak out and really to stop and be thoughtful about, okay, what am I going to do now? What should the drone be doing at this point? And a lot of times, 99% of the time, things always work out, but crashing is just part of it. So I feel like as long as you're kind of putting into practice and just taking the steps necessary to get to the point where you're flying a little bit more aggressively or over water or whatever to kind of eventually get to the point where it's not as intimidating. It's just one of those, the more you get out and do it, the more that you'll see how capable these things are.
No, that's great. Dusty, really appreciate having you on again here and talking about this subject. I think it's such a common question we get, and I think we're going to probably be revisiting it as time goes on. And it's a great refresher. Takeaways being, minimize your financial risk by just investing in a beginner drone. Look into warranties and repair programs before you buy the
Mhm.
drone. Understand that crashing is part of it. And so just internalize that and in some ways accept that, as well as just get to know your drone and take the time
Sure.
it really takes to learn it and understand the features that'll help you minimize that chance of crashing it.
So within the Drone Launch Connect community, we've got just members of drone pilots from all around the world. Within the community, we've got a forum, of course, just focused on different things, but we have a space in there to where you can share your successes, whether you've got a new client, you just passed your 107, whatever. My favorite space is we have a share your fail space in there. So this is like for the days that you do go out and crash or you do cut your hand in front of your client or something like that. This is where people can come and share those stories as well. And so it is a great way to kind of put yourself out there on the line, but there's some really good, some really funny stories in there. The more that these stories are being posted, the more that people are less hesitant to share them. So I feel like it's just another cool feature of the community is people being willing to share these stories and to know that, we're all human and we all make mistakes and these things are going to crash at some point in time. Thanks for having me on though, John.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Tell me one more time where you could find that community where you can learn more about other people's experience scratching.
Sure. So this is Drone Launch Connect. You can go to dronelaunchacademy.com/DLC, and that'll take you to our landing page to where you can go ahead and learn some more about the community and get signed up.
Good to know. That's an awesome idea. And Drone Launch Academy is an educational organization just here to help all drone pilots, especially beginners. And so that's a really cool feature. Thanks again
Yeah.
for being on. This was a sweet conversation. In the meantime, you can submit your own questions about drones, and we will find the answer to them. Any question you have, we'll look for the person who can answer them. You can go ahead and submit a question over ydqa.io, or going back to that Drone Launch Connect private community. If you're part of that, go ahead and type in a question through there. We'll see it and we'll find the answer. In the meantime, we'll see you in the sky.